one step up, and we have introspection. Introspection is the frequency, the wavelength, where we start by looking at ourselves. We're not quick to project. I'm not quick to make you the enemy or to make you the problem. I start by looking in deep within. I pick things apart and I ask myself how I contributed to this situation. How we moved from dialogue to dire. How we moved from peace to despair. From compassion to desperation. How did that happen? What was my role in that cascade of events? That is introspection. Now, introspection is an amazing place. It is a mark of maturity, an encouraging one at that. It has its shortcomings, it has its limitations. As with driving a car, it also has blind spots, which is why feedback is always very important, because we don't see ourselves, others do. So it is important to realize that we can't depend on the mind that gets us into trouble to take us out of our pain. We may always need fresh eyes, more input, more data, that which we do not see. We may have to consult with. So it takes us one notch up, drumming up the courage to pull someone in and having a deliberation. So a deliberation is one notch after introspection. You talk to someone and you get their opinion on things. Hopefully they get to catch your blind spots and my blind spots. And hopefully we get to be not too defensive. We get to embrace what it is that they say, sit with it, and introspect with it further, or on it further. But at that time, we would not be introspecting. When you've gathered feedback, and before we move on to the next, when you gather feedback, when light is shone in an area, a corridor of your soul that was dark, you see more than you could see before. So the person uncovers a blind spot. You see clearly, and because it is your life and your experiences, you have more context than the person that you're talking to or speaking with, which means you will, in that engagement and through their contribution, get to see a lot more than you otherwise would have seen. You will even get to see things that they don't see. And when they do that, you will engage, bring these into the conversation, and enable them to show you even further blind spots. So ultimately, you have a cycle. You cycle through these blind spots, and it's like peeling layers, which make you even more aware, and they take you to a place of deeper consciousness, which eventually bring you to a place of self-awareness. And you move away from that self-consciousness that we talked about that can be very counterproductive because it focuses on the self. This is the substance of which selflessness and being unassuming is made. Because you start grasping and you start accepting your role as one of a peacemaker, as one of a healer, one of a mender, one of a justice seeker, one of an enabler and an empowerer. Having taken the feedback from introspection, introspection and deliberation, the next chamber and thought process up is reflection. So you're reflecting on the data that you would have received, all the feedback that would have come, the one that comes from outside of you and the one that comes from within you. You do a reflection, a deep reflection on those. And this reflection will open up certain portals. Up until this point, we could say you have been or had been dealing in the conscious or living in that conscious space, dwelling in the conscious mind. When you start deep reflection, there is a connection established with the subconscious mind, because it has a deeper reach. And all that it needs is that trigger. So that ability to receive feedback is like looking in the mirror. And as we know, it is not the easiest of things to do, because typically the only time we look in the mirror is when we want to cover or beautify what we see, never to really appraise and to appreciate what's already there. A pause there for that to sink, because it is of paramount importance. So when we manage to flick that switch, to swat that switch, something shifts within us and it takes us even deeper, a deeper connection with our inner selves. So there's an alignment going on. In the medical arena, we talk about head and heart coherence. If they are in sync, then we are in a state of harmony, peace. We're calm, we're collected, and we're composed. So this process is taking us to that place of peace. It takes us there slowly, and it requires work. It just doesn't happen on a whim. We have to flex that muscle. We have to train it, hard as it may be sometimes. That is why we're called upon not to be careful, not to be cautious, rather to be intentional and to be deliberate. So we're driven not by the things we want to avoid, the things we want to prevent. We're driven by the things we want to achieve. We're not motivated by our fears. We're inspired by our aspirations. The difference we want to make, serving a purpose that is bigger than the self. Are you beginning to feel this? I know it is a lot to take in. And I implore you not to try to memorize anything that I am saying, because I'm not talking to your intellect. I'm speaking directly to your soul. So just take it all in. When you need it, it will come and bubble to the surface. And take everything I say at face value. As the sacred book would say, test the spirit. Take all that is good, but test the spirit. Only take what becomes your truth, what you can truly relate with. Of course, scripture and the Bible is my reference point. There is nothing I say, communicate, or share that doesn't take its rise from the Bible. That's the ultimate source. So we were talking about that shift, that subtle, delicate, but magnanimous shift that happens when you step out in faith, take that deep dive, and embrace feedback. Sometimes it takes going through the desert to do that, and that's just part of the journey. Surrendering, dying to self. Not always easy, but you can be rest assured it is simple. Simple doesn't make it easy. Just as it is easy to understand something, but until you build that something that you have understood, make it, sew it into the fabric of your being, it doesn't become a knowing, which means you will understand it, but when rubber meets the road, you will go in the opposite direction. You will do something else.